If you're somebody who has a hard time rotating their tibia or doesn't know how to feel it, you should probably watch the rest of this video. So when we're looking at how well does our tibia rotate relative to our upper leg, we're trying to create independent movement from the lower leg to the upper leg. A couple things we need to focus on is ensuring that we can contract our hamstring. One way you might be able to do that is thinking about pushing your heel down or thinking about pulling your foot towards you so that we can squeeze our hamstring almost like we're doing a hamstring curl in this position, and feeling the hamstring contract as I rotate externally and as I rotate internally. No matter how much range of motion we actually have visibly at our tibia, if you can find the outermost portion of your hamstring when you externally rotate, and if you can feel the inner portion of your hamstring as you internally rotate, then we're off to a good start. So when we're looking at how much does our tibia rotate, typically human anatomy has it where we externally rotate further than the knee actually internally rotates. So we should not be looking to compare them from region to region because we're not going to have even range of motion there. But if somebody lacks external rotation of their tibia, we can passive stretch it and do isometric contractions like pails and rails to open up capsule space in our knee joint. And so what would that look like? We're going to have you use if you're using your right leg, we're going to have you use your right arm, and you're going to pull yourself into a passive stretch, and you're going to use the opposing arm under your leg to kind of lock yourself down. What you're going to do is you're going to use this hand to rotate your tibia until we can find a passive stretch on the inner portion of our knee. That's the open side of our knee. It might take some time to find that stretch, but let's sit here for roughly 2 minutes and see if we can get any kind of stretch sensation to set in. If you have a hard time finding the stretch, then you could go ahead and do a pail, meaning you're trying to rotate your leg, your shin internally, but I'm going to block myself with my hand here. And so I would be isometrically contracting this stretched tissue by pushing into my hand and not letting myself move. So sometimes we call it a pail finder, and the pail can help you quite literally find the right tissue that we want to stretch. If you need to do a pail finder, do so for like say 10 seconds or so, and then relax. Try to find that passive stretch again. If we have the passive stretch, we'd stay there for 2 minutes because we want to elicit a adaptation to occur, which is creating some passive space. We're going to breathe into it, and after the 2 minutes is up, we would begin our isometric contractions, the pail. So we would push our foot into our hand, and we're not letting ourselves move. I'm not letting this occur, and I would be trying to squeeze the inner portion of my knee as I'm doing the pail. And if you have a hard time doing that, or you feel your ankle too much, I would encourage you to come out of dorsiflexion where you're not pulled all the way up, and still do the exact same positioning, but relax the ankle's dorsiflexion and see if we can contract from there. If we don't feel any isometric contraction on the open side of our knee's rotation, then we simply just need to sit there and hold the foot rotating into my hand, keep holding the pail in an effort to eventually turn it on. If you're somebody who has a problem feeling that and you don't feel it, and you're sitting here saying, or if you're sitting here feeling like you're wasting your time, you are not alone, but there needs to be a conscious effort to driving tension from this region of our leg. And so I would sit here and pail for as long as you need to. This is one of those positions that oftentimes longer pails do better, whereas like with the hips, people often don't need to pail that long to find it. So if paling here longer does you well, absolutely spend time there and do that. So we'd sit here and pail for about a minute or so and try to drive up the intensity and create more tension from that inner portion of my knee. I would hold it for another 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1, and I would relax. And then I'd want to rail, which would be going the opposite direction. So I'm going to leave my hand here. I'm going to start contracting my hamstring by thinking about driving my heel towards me, and I'm going to rail and try to rotate my tibia a little bit deeper into external rotation. And so now instead of feeling the inner portion, the open side of my knee, I am now feeling the closing portion of my knee, the right side of it. I'll feel this portion of my hamstring contracting to pull me deeper into external rotation of the tibia. I would hold that and just keep squeezing. If you feel your shin working, your ankle working, relax your ankle, don't push into so much dorsiflexion, and continue the rotation from there. After you hold the rail, it'd be good practice to go ahead and do some axial cars, where we sit here and focus on how well can I rotate my tibia through its available workspace, through its available joint workspace, and get a sense of what range of motion is actually there and available for that. And axial cars are a good way to reinforce range of motion that was opened up. And now we can do the same thing for internal rotation of our tibia. So remember, we aren't supposed to have as much internal rotation as external rotation. So we are not comparing the two and saying, oh, my ER is so much better than my IR because I have more range of motion there. Yeah, you're anatomically supposed to. But that's not to say that the internal rotation, even though it's not that much range of motion, that doesn't mean it's not significant. It is very significant. So what we're gonna do is the exact same setup, but the reverse. And so I'm gonna have my left hand now pulling my shin into passive internal rotation. I can use my other arm to kind of lock myself down so that my hip isn't collapsing on me. And I would go until I find a stretch on my open side. Typically speaking, finding a stretch for your knee is extremely challenging. So it may take some time and it might not knock your socks off, so to speak. It might not be all that intense, but we're just trying to spend some time there and give it some exposure to range of motion it's not used to. And again, if you have a hard time finding any sensation on that outer knee, go ahead and do a pale finder, where I'm trying to externally rotate my tibia, but I'm gonna block myself and try to create an isometric. We're doing the pale finder. And so we could pale for about 10 seconds or so and then relax. Try to pull myself a little bit deeper, and I definitely feel a little bit more of a stretch on my outer knee. Just like with external rotation of our knee, we hold the stretch for at least 2 minutes. Okay, we need to be stretching long enough to elicit change. After your 2-minute stretch, we're gonna go ahead and begin our pales, our isometrics, our progressive angular isometric loading, where we go ahead and we start trying to externally rotate our tibia, but my hand is not moving. I am holding this completely still, and I'm trying to drive tension to my outer hamstring knee region and just contract it while it's in a stretched position. I'm gonna go ahead and sit here for about 30 more seconds and continue generating tension. And I'm gonna go for another 10, 9, a little bit harder, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and relax. So that was the pales contraction, contracting the open side. Now we have to do the rail, the regressive angular isometric loading. So that would be the closing side now, the inner portion of my knee. So what I'm gonna do is I am going to try to pull my foot away from my hands and rotate my tibia deeper into internal rotation and contract my inner hamstring and knee while doing so. Again, I want you to try to pull your knee back into you and keep squeezing, and think about running away from your hand if you were still holding it there. You would hold that for about 30 seconds to a minute while still contracting the inner hamstring and the knee. And after you'd spend your time in that range, we would do axial cars again and rotate through whatever available workspace we have. This whole setup of doing positional isometrics could be done at any degree of flexion or extension of our knee. We could do pales and rails in full knee flexion. We could do it in near end knee flexion. We can do it at about 90 degrees in relative flexion. And we could do it in near extension if we need to work on how well our tibia rotates in knee extension. But you will not be able to rotate your knee if your knee is completely locked out. If you are in terminal knee extension, you will not be able to rotate your knee. And so that is why it is important for us to rotate near end extension somewhere through the mid range and somewhere through the end range as well, so that we can ensure that we have the ability to rotate through the full range as we do our knee cars. If you're somebody that has a hard time feeling this stuff, simply just doing axial cars side to side and really focusing on the hamstring's contributions to this movement goes a very long way, and is likely something you just need to develop as a skill over time so that you can get more productive training out of your knees and your volume isn't in the gutter. And at the end of the day, finding the right portion, the right tissue contributing to the knee's rotation is absolutely the most important part, because if we can't find our knees, the exercise is going to do utterly nothing for us. So we need to ensure we find our knees as best we can, and then we proceed with the constraints from there.